Good afternoon and welcome to today's Gainline. We've got a slightly different show for you this afternoon, as I'm joined with Wales Online's Head of Sport, Paul Abandonnato, and Wales Online Editor, Paul Rowland. Thanks for joining me, gents.
Hello. No problem, hello.
So we thought we'd use today to give you a slightly different insight into the Rugby World Cup from our perspective and within a sort of busy newsroom. So, gentlemen, first of all, from your point of view, how do you think momentum has built so far in the tournament, and do you think the nation has sort of really got hold of this World Cup at this point?
Well, look, Wales is always going to be obsessed by the Rugby World Cup, and it's massive here. It's fantastic fun to be covering a World Cup in Wales Online. It's the biggest thing we do. That said, we were pretty unsure how the time difference issue would go down with our audience and what difference that would make. But it's been absolutely brilliant. You could see from the Australia game in particular, that's really kicked things into another gear. And for us, actually having that first thing on a Sunday morning, while it was a really unusual time to be watching rugby, meant that our audience had coffee in hand, bacon roll in hand, watch the game, and then spend all day reading about it. And we could see that in terms of how people were reacting to it, what kind of material they were wanting to read about. And the thing that's always great with a fantastic Wales win is people just want to read every single word that every single person says about them, the opposition, what happened, and they want to read it again the next day and the next day and the next day. And I think in terms of what people have been reacting to on Wales Online, this has been one of the most engaging games, really, in terms of so many talking points, so many controversies and moments of excitement, and personally probably the most stressful Wales game I've ever watched. So that seems to have really made this World Cup go with a bang for Welsh fans.
Paul, you've covered Rugby World Cups, Lions Tours, Euro 2016. How does this compare so far, even though it's still early days?
I think just because of the way society is going, and you're noticing even more people reading what you're doing at the moment, as Paul just identified. Funny enough, we were both at a Cardiff Breakfast Club meeting this morning where Ryan Giggs was the guest speaker, and he was talking about Euro 2016 and how rugby fans suddenly got involved with the Welsh football team, and how now the more Wales progress in this World Cup, the more football fans will get involved with the Welsh rugby team. And he used the phrase that a Welsh nation is likely to ride on a crest of emotion, and I think that sums it up perfectly. I think you're just tapping into all the emotion out there, but also, we've got some brilliant rugby writers who are providing proper analysis of exactly what's going on out there in Japan. We've also introduced a 24-hour newsroom to cope with the 8-hour time difference there, because we could just see the thirst from the Welsh public to read about this. So when they are getting up for work at 6, 7 in the morning, they've already got all the World Cup headlines that we've been working on painstakingly through the night, or colleagues of mine have anyway, been working on painstakingly through the night. So we're dealing with the demand because the demand is there.
Yeah, you'll notice Abbo's name missing from the overnight shifts, but anyone who's listening to our podcast will listen to Simon Thomas managed to get 3 or 4 mentions of the 4 a.m. starts into everything he says. But fair play to everyone who's on those shifts. It's not easy. Sean, I know yourself have had a week of quite literally sleepless nights and a borderline Pro Plus addiction. So it's all worth it in the end, I think.
Yeah, just about. So we don't just want to hear from our experts and our journalists, we want to hear from you, the public, and we've been out and about in 2 Welsh towns to find out who they think are performing well in this World Cup and how far they think Wales can go.
Final.
You're going to win.
I think Wales could potentially win the tournament.
Final, I reckon. All the way.
Semi-finals, probably, I reckon.
I think Wales can go all the way, especially when we played against Australia. I think we've shown resolve, especially in defence.
Probably the final, I'd say.
I think Wales could go pretty far into the finals.
I think they'll get to at least the semi-final.
I reckon we're going all the way. Definitely the final.
In my heart, I feel they can, but the head says semi-final.
Well, I think the resilience and courage they showed against Australia, that they can go all the way to the final.
There we are, the views of some of the Welsh public there, and we want to hear from you. Please ask any questions or express any views in the comment section below the video you're watching. So, gentlemen, going back to our coverage and maybe giving people an insight of how you deal with sort of breaking news during a World Cup. We obviously had a turbulent start to the tournament with the Rob Howley news breaking out of nowhere, really, during a week where we were sort of all just prepping for the start of the tournament. Be quite interesting to hear your views about and sort of get an idea of how a newsroom reacts to news like that and how it's all sort of hands to the pump straight away when that happens.
Well, I'll quickly start that, sorry, but I remember I just got a message from our man in Japan, Matt Southcombe. I think it was something like 20-4. I remember literally running, and I do mean running, down to Paul's office as quick as Usain Bolt almost. And sort of, what am I doing just charging down there just to sort of start the process going, I suppose is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, there's a particular buzz always that happens when a really, really big story happens in a newsroom breaks, and this was one of the most jaw-dropping news breaks I think we've had in a long time. One of our colleagues said to me afterwards he was actually sitting his computer with headphones on, so couldn't hear anything that's happening around him, but could tell something big had happened from the way people were talking and behaving. And so, I mean, it's an extraordinary situation to have a senior Welsh coach, someone who's given so much to Welsh rugby as Rob Howley, leave camp on the eve of World Cup in such dramatic circumstances. And obviously there's a lot of interest still, to be fair, in what's going to happen there and the investigation. You know, from our understanding, you're speaking to people close to the story, there's been a huge amount of very lurid speculation around what he's alleged to have done. You know, we understand that is dramatically wide of the mark, and there is an investigation that's going on. You know, speaking to people in the WU around that will happen. They're determined that will happen at the right pace and at the right level of scrutiny. And we've taken a decision really once the rugby started that we aren't going to keep delving into that story. There will be a time and a place for that to happen. At this point in time, you know, we're as invested as the Welsh public and the Welsh management in Wales being successful in this World Cup, and we will focus 100% on the rugby during this time. But for sure, it was a horrendous opening, but I think actually Wales have handled it about as well as they possibly could have done. It was a textbook response in my view, you know, bringing out Martin Phillips, Warren Gatlin, Jonathan Davis, Dan Bigger, senior players, senior management straight away to address it. They've been as open as they possibly can be. There's now an investigation to happen. There's a major tournament to go and try and win, and I think they need no distractions in terms of trying to do the latter.
Well, back to the rugby, and one of the benefits of working within a newsroom like ours is the fact that we have access to all sorts of pundits and legends of the game. Paul, in particular, we've got Nigel Owens and Barry John, just two of our columnists for the World Cup, as well as people like Mike Phillips. Tell us a little bit about the conversations you had with those people.
Well, I spoke to Nige yesterday morning, and also this morning as well. He's out in Japan, obviously preparing for the World Cup. He writes a column for Wales Online and for the West Mail magazine at the weekend. He's sort of given us a sort of day-by-day account of his diary out there in Japan last week and running into this week when he referees England and Argentina on Saturday. What I found fascinating, though, he was part of the refereeing team doing Scotland-Samoa on Monday. They're all based in Tokyo, the referees and all the match officials there. I think they flew to Kobe City where the Scotland game was, and he was telling me that they sat down as a group, the four of them. So there was the match referee, there was Nigel who was doing touch judge, the other touch judge and the TMO, and they watched Wales Australia, and he said he was really cheering for Wales because even though when you're refereeing a game, you're 100% professional in that game, and when he does Wales v the Barbars at the Principality Stadium at the end of November, it'll be red v black for him in that game. But he says the referees and officials, they are all secretly cheering their own, well, not even secretly, cheering on their own team while the action is going on. So the English refs are cheering England and so on. And he says there's a lot of banter flying around there. I remember he said, I can just imagine how that win went back home. And yeah, nice. You wouldn't imagine just how much, but of course he did. Barry John was talking, amongst other things, about why he thinks Rhys Patchell has now edged ahead in the pecking order. Massive fan of Gareth Anscombe, Barry is massive fan, so losing Anscombe was a huge blow, he felt, to Wales' prospects. He thinks Patchell's performance against Australia's given him the edge for the rest of the tournament, but he does make the point, whichever decision Warren Gatland makes here is the correct decision in his eyes because of the different strengths they bring. What do you think?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Rhys Patchell was brilliant against Australia. It must be an incredibly hard thing to do to come off the bench in the middle of a first half when you're expecting that you maybe will be called on in the latter part and not just finish off the game but really direct it, and he did brilliantly at that in those circumstances. That said, Biggar is the experienced man. Patchell is... I'm yet to be convinced by his consistency.
Yeah.
There's really, I think, valid concerns about his defence. Still, there's been a lot said about his tackle technique this week. So for me, Biggar's still the man in possession. I'm yet to see anything that would tell me otherwise. I thought he was excellent himself before he had to go off against Australia. So I'd stick with Biggar for now. Patchell's a fantastic option to have. It's really great for Welsh rugby to see him really staking his claim back to that position he seemed to be adopting before his injury problems. And I think we're in a good shape.
Well, we are starting to get some questions and comments in from you at home. Nice to see or hear even from Carl Williams, who says he's streaming from Cape Town. So Wales Online, proper global audience today.
Absolutely.
Carl Pring asks, he is a proud Welshman, an adopted Geordie. I think Wales could make the final. Who knows? In a one-off game, even win it. How far do you think we can go?
I think that the victory over Australia has changed the mantra a little bit, and the fact that it's more likely to be one of France or Argentina and then Ireland or South Africa in the semi-final really does create an opening, whereas in that other section you've got New Zealand, you've got England, although to be fair, under Gatland, in the games that have mattered, and I mean things like 2013, the last World Cup, when they've met with unbeaten records in the Six Nations, Wales have had the Indian sign over England in the big matches that have really mattered, so certainly nothing to fear there. I think that we'll get to the semi-finals and then it really is on the day.
I think the simple answer to this question is, on form, it will be the semi-finals before Wales meet anyone against whom they won't be favourites. Or Wales should meet anyone they won't be favourites against.
Fairly optimistic answers then. Another question from Gary. I might catch you on the hop a little bit with this one. If you could pick another World Cup player from another nation, slot them into the Wales team, who would you pick?
I'm going to choose the easy one. We've already had the fly-off discussion, but I would pick Bowden Barrett because I just think he's the best rugby player in the world, and I think that he would just offer that extra dimension that could get Wales over the line and win the World Cup.
I think my answer to this will be based on where I think Wales have needed a little bit more punch, and that's in the centre. And that second half against Australia, Karevi was just
what a player that
absolutely a ball of power. And I think if you put him into that Welsh midfield, that would make a dramatic difference. Don't get me wrong, Jonathan Davies and Hadley Park's fantastic players, but there's almost no one in world rugby who's as destructive as Karevi.
Paul, maybe this one is one for you. Laura asks, how does this World Cup compare to others that you've covered? Obviously, Japan being the host, it's unique in that sense. What kind of feeling are you getting?
I was at the 99 World Cup final between Australia and France. I almost even had to think of who was in that final. It was a pretty nondescript game, to be honest with you. 95 I watched from afar in South Africa, and I think people who were there will still say that was the best one because of the Rainbow Nation and everything that went with that, and the incredible ending with Mandela giving wearing Francois Pienaar's shirt and presenting the cup and so on. But you know, for me, the World Cup highlight was the win over England last time at Twickenham. That was on a Saturday night, and Paul's mentioned about a newsroom getting an incredible buzz when you have a major breaking story. That's a match, but it's another example of that. It was just the spin-off that came with that was fantastic, but I just feel there's even more interest this time. I just think 4 years on, in a social media age, in the digital age, there's even greater interest out there, and I just think that this one will eclipse that as well.
What's great for me about this one is it's not a country that we're used to watching rugby in, that the fans are used to going to attend rugby in, and there's just something fascinating about the dynamic around this World Cup. I find it really interesting when I, speaking to Matt Southcombe out there and seeing his dispatches and all the stuff about what they're eating, what the players are doing, hearing about players going to out for sushi, and it's just such a different cultural experience, both around the sport, but also all the dynamics of being out there. And I think that makes this a really different World Cup, and it's really refreshing.
Okay, I think we might have time for one more quick question. Peter asks, other than Wales, which team do you enjoy watching the most?
Wow. I've loved watching Japan. I think that's the obvious answer. Yeah. Their win. When they were beating Ireland and their replacement, the name escapes me, their replacement was running towards a line with that interception near the end of the game. I was actually screaming at the TV, go on, go on, go on. I don't want to name drop again, but I was speaking to Barry John about that, and he said that he was screaming, change the angle, change the angle, change the angle. Apparently you're never meant to run the straight line that as a top flight player. But, to get into it like that for a neutral side, I think the fact that they're there, as Paul said, they're the host nation, it's an entirely different feel to it. There are capacity crowds there, not just at their own games. I've really loved watching them. I really, really enjoyed that game against Ireland.
For me, it's New Zealand. I mean, it doesn't matter how many times I see it. The haka, the black shirts, and just the way, the intensity they bring to their rugby. That South Africa game was absolutely fantastic. Even seeing them destroy Canada yesterday, they've just got such panache and flair about them, and it's just one of the great sights of global sport, watching New Zealand in full cry.
We're going to squeeze one more in. Dave Stockton has just written to us, hello, do you think Alan Jones will retire at the end of the World Cup? What do you think, Paul? You've got the inside line.
Well, I haven't actually, but no, I don't. I think that he's targeted from the inside line of the things that you're hearing. I think he's targeted the next Lions tour, to be honest with you. So I'm not convinced about that. It wouldn't surprise me, because it'd be a heck of a way to go out, what an incredible servant and so on, but cracky, he looks fresh as a daisy.
I mean, in some senses it seems like the end of an era for him. New coach, he's of that age, set the caps record, but everything you hear is that he doesn't want to be left out of a single minute of a single game. So given the level he's performing at, and his performance against Australia was superhuman, why would you retire unless your head's gone and mentally you've lost the will? And if there's one thing you can say about Alan Wynne-Jones ahead of any other player, he has not lost the will.
Yeah, and I suppose the answer to that is tied in with that, is what we don't know is how much effort he has to put in with his aging body to be able to perform to that level, which wouldn't necessarily been the case 10 years ago. But if he hasn't lost the will, and as Paul says, he doesn't appear to have in any way, shape whatsoever, no, I think he'll go on for the next Lions tour. And I think he or Owen Farrell will be captain of that Lions tour as well.
Well, here's your hoping. I think we're going to have to draw a line under it today. Thank you very much for joining us again. Please keep bringing in your questions. We will try and answer them again tomorrow. For all your latest rugby breaking news, all the updates, all the action, please visit Wales Online, and we'll keep you updated every day during the World Cup. Thank you very much.